My name is Tessa Bennett. I'm 29 years old, and the night my family finally applauded my brother for being self-made, I was sitting 3 seats away with my bank app open under the table. My mother lifted her wine glass in the private dining room of a country club and said, loud enough for every aunt, cousin, and family friend to hear, Mason achieved everything on his own. No handouts, no shortcuts, just discipline. The table burst into applause. My brother smiled like a man receiving an award he had truly earned. He even placed one hand over his chest, pretending to be humbled, while the $6,500 warehouse payment I had covered that morning was still marked processing on my screen. I didn't blink. I didn't cry. I just looked at him and waited for him to correct her. He didn't. My mother kept going, praising his grit, his independence, his business mind, and every word felt like someone scraping a key across the life I had quietly sacrificed. For 18 months, I had paid the warehouse lease for his small delivery company. I had covered the insurance, the software subscription, and the emergency payroll when he claimed he was 1 month away from breaking through. And now he was sitting there, accepting applause for standing on his own 2 feet while mine were buried under his bills. So when my mother turned to me and said, Tessa, aren't you proud of your brother? I smiled, set my phone on the table and said, absolutely. And if Mason did it all alone, then he'll be fine without the $6,500 I canceled before dessert. The applause died so fast I could hear my brother's fork hit his plate. Before I tell you what he said, and what happened after I walked out, tell me, what time is it for you right now? And where are you watching from? I'm curious to see how far this story will travel. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Mason's smile stayed on his face, but it changed shape, like a mask cracking at the edges. My mother stared at me as if I had thrown wine across the table instead of telling the truth. My father lowered his glass slowly. My aunt whispered, what does she mean? Cancelled? Mason laughed first, a dry, fake laugh that made the whole room even quieter. Tessa's being dramatic, he said, waving one hand as if he could brush the truth off the table. She helped with a few things early on. That's what family does. I tapped my phone screen and turned it toward him. Early on? The warehouse lease renewed this morning. Fleet insurance is due Friday. Dispatch Pro bills tomorrow. Payroll bridge payment is scheduled for Monday. Should I keep going? His face changed again. This time, everyone saw it. My mother reached for my wrist and hissed, not here. I pulled my hand back gently. Why not here? You praised him here. Mason leaned forward, his voice low and sharp. You're embarrassing yourself. I looked straight at him. No, Mason. I funded your image. There's a difference. The room went silent. That was the first time I saw real fear in his eyes. Not shame, not regret, but fear. Because he knew exactly what I had done. I hadn't made a speech. I hadn't posted screenshots. I hadn't screamed. I had simply gone into every account where my card, my name, and my credit had been keeping his company alive, and I had removed myself. The warehouse manager already had notice. The software platform would lock him out after midnight. The insurance would not renew without payment. And the payroll advance he thought would clear Monday had been canceled, while my mother was calling him self-made. Mason tried to recover by smirking. You wouldn't really do that. I opened my email, clicked the confirmation, and slid the phone across the table. I already did. My cousin stopped chewing. My father closed his eyes. My mother whispered, Tessa, fix this. That was the moment I realized they still didn't understand. They thought I had made a threat. But I had made a decision. Mason stood so quickly his chair scraped backward against the polished floor. A few people from the next table glanced over. You can't just destroy my business because you're jealous. I stood too, but slowly, because I wanted him to see that I wasn't trembling anymore. I didn't destroy your business. I removed myself from it. If it collapses without me, then maybe it was never yours. His face turned red. My mother started crying, but not because I had been used. She cried because Mason might finally be exposed. That hurt more than I expected, but it also made something inside me harden. My father finally spoke, his voice careful. Mason, is what she's saying true? Mason didn't answer right away, and that silence was louder than any confession. He looked at me instead, like I had betrayed a secret agreement. You promised you'd help until things were stable. No, I said. You promised things would be stable 3 months ago, then 6 months ago, then last Christmas, then last week. My mother wiped her face and snapped, "This is not the time to keep score." I gave a small laugh, not because anything was funny, but because I finally understood the rules of my family. Mason was allowed to take endlessly. I was only wrong when I started counting. I picked up my purse, looked around the table, and said, "Enjoy the celebration. I'm sure the self-made man can cover the bill." Then I walked out before anyone could see my hands shaking. Behind me, Mason called my name once, sharp and angry. I didn't turn around, because for the first time in years I knew the emergency was not mine to solve. By the time I reached my car, my phone had already started vibrating. Mason called first, then my mother, then Mason again. Then a text from my father. "Come back inside. This has gone far enough." I sat behind the wheel, locked the doors, and watched their names light up the screen like alarms. For years, those alarms had controlled me. If Mason needed help, I answered. If Mom sounded disappointed, I apologized. If Dad said I was making things harder, I made myself smaller. That night, I let every call go unanswered. When I got home, I made coffee even though it was almost midnight, sat at my kitchen table, and opened a folder on my laptop called Mason Payments. I had created it months earlier, not because I planned revenge, but because part of me knew I might one day need proof that I wasn't crazy. The folder held lease receipts, bank transfers, screenshots of desperate texts, and one voice memo Mason had sent me after I covered his first warehouse deposit. "You're saving my life, Tess. I'll pay you back before anyone knows." Anyone. That word stared back at me like a warning I had ignored. He never wanted help. He wanted invisible help. He wanted the kind that allowed him to stand on a stage and call himself self-made. At 12:07 a.m., the first real message came through. Dispatch Pro locked me out. "What did you do?" I didn't answer. At 12:18, another. "My routes for tomorrow are gone. Drivers are texting me. This is serious." At 12:41, "Stop acting insane and turn it back on." There it was. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "Thank you." Not, "I lied." Just a command. I opened my banking app and canceled the final scheduled transfer, the one marked temporary support. Even though temporary had lasted 18 months. In the memo line, before confirming, I typed 6 words. Final support ended. Stand on your own. I stared at the confirmation screen for a long time. My heart was pounding, but underneath the fear was something unfamiliar. Relief, not happiness, not revenge yet. Just the first breath after holding air too long. Then Mason sent another message. "You realize if I go down, everyone will know it's because of you." I almost laughed at the cruelty of it. Even his failure had to belong to me. I turned my phone face down and left it on the kitchen counter. I slept badly, but I slept. The next morning, Natalie Brooks, my best friend and co-worker at a medical compliance firm, found me staring at a blank spreadsheet during our break. I told her everything, from the dinner to the canceled payments to Mason's midnight threats. She didn't gasp dramatically. She didn't tell me to be kinder. She just asked, "How much of your life has been postponed so he could look successful?" That question hit harder than Mason's anger, because the answer was everywhere. It was in the apartment I hadn't upgraded, the certification course I hadn't taken, the savings account I kept draining, the vacations I kept canceling, the dental work I delayed because Mason had one emergency after another. It was even in the way I checked my bank balance before buying groceries, while Mason posted photos from networking dinners and called them business development. Natalie leaned closer and said, "Tessa, boundaries don't become cruel just because entitled people hate them." I repeated that sentence all day. Boundaries don't become cruel. By noon, Mason had sent 23 texts. By 3, my mother left a voicemail saying, "Your brother could lose everything." I listened to it once and whispered, "Then maybe everything was never stable." That evening, Mason finally changed tactics. He sent me a photo of our childhood, both of us sitting on the hood of Dad's old truck, my arm around his shoulders. Under it, he wrote, "I guess family means nothing to you." For a moment, my thumb hovered over the keyboard. The old me would have answered. She would have explained, apologized, softened the boundary, offered one last payment with conditions nobody respected. Then I remembered the country club applause, the way he smiled while I disappeared. I remembered my mother saying no handouts while my money was literally holding his business together. I deleted the message without replying. Then I opened my laptop again and moved every receipt into a second folder titled, "Do Not Forget." That wasn't for court. That wasn't for revenge. It was for me. Because I knew the hardest part would not be cutting Mason off. The hardest part would be surviving the guilt my family would throw at me for finally choosing myself. That was the first night Mason learned my silence could cost him more than my words. 3 days later, my mother demanded a family meeting at my parents' house. She didn't ask if I was free. She texted, 7 o'clock, we need to discuss what you've done. That sentence told me everything. Not what Mason had lied about, not what they had ignored, what I had done. I almost didn't go, but a strange calm came over me. If they wanted a meeting, I would bring the truth in writing. I printed every receipt, every transfer, every invoice with my name on it, and placed them in a plain manila folder. I also printed the messages where Mason had promised repayment. The ones where he called the support temporary, and the one from the night before, where he warned me that everyone would know his collapse was my fault. When I arrived, Mason was already sitting at the dining table, wearing the same expensive watch he claimed was a gift from a client. My mother sat beside him with tissues ready, as if he were the injured party. My father stood by the fireplace, arms crossed, preparing to judge before hearing evidence. The dining room looked exactly like it always had. Family photos on the wall, polished table, warm lights, the kind of room where people pretended love and loyalty meant never asking uncomfortable questions. "Tessa," Mom began, "you need to restore the payments until Mason can adjust." I didn't sit. "No." Mason slammed his palm on the table. "You're doing this because you can't handle me being successful." I looked at him for a long second. "Mason, your drivers couldn't leave the depot yesterday because your route software was suspended. Your warehouse manager emailed you a late notice this morning. Your insurance broker called me because my card was removed. That's not success. That's a costume." My mother's mouth tightened. "You are humiliating him." "No," I said. "I'm refusing to keep financing the humiliation of myself." Mason stood up, pointing at me. "You promised you'd help me." "I promised temporary help after you said you'd pay me back in 3 months. That was 18 months ago." "You make it sound like I forced you." I opened the folder and spread the first stack of papers across the table. The pages slid over the polished wood like evidence in a room that had always preferred emotion over facts. "No, you manipulated me. There's a difference." My father finally moved closer. He picked up one invoice, then another. I watched his expression shift from irritation to confusion to something close to embarrassment. 6,500 every month? He asked. My mother snapped, "Gregory, don't start." But he didn't put the papers down. Mason tried to grab them, and I pulled them back. "These are copies. Touch them if you want." For the first time, my father looked at Mason instead of me. "You told us investors were covering operations." Mason's jaw tightened. They were. Tessa just helped bridge gaps. "Every month?" Dad asked. Mason looked away. That tiny movement changed the room. My mother saw it too, but she refused to surrender. She turned on me with tears in her eyes. "Why would you let us believe he did it alone?" I almost laughed, but it came out broken. "Because every time I tried to say I was struggling, you told me not to make Mason's moment about me." Silence. That one landed. My mother looked down. Mason didn't. He leaned forward and said the cruelest thing he could think of. "You always needed to feel important. That's what this is really about." I felt the old version of myself flinch, the one that would have apologized just to make peace. But she didn't get to speak this time. I gathered the papers and said, "You're right about one thing. I do need to feel important. Important enough not to bankroll someone who erases me." My mother whispered, "He's your brother." "And I'm your daughter," I answered. No one replied. That silence said more than any argument could. Then my phone buzzed. It was an email from Mason's warehouse manager. "Account delinquent. Access will be restricted Monday if payment is not received." Mason saw the subject line over my shoulder, and his face went pale. My mother whispered, "Tessa, please." I looked at all three of them and said, "Monday is not my problem." My father took one more receipt from the table, staring at the total at the bottom. "Mason," he said slowly, "how much debt are you actually in?" Mason's mouth opened, but no answer came out. For the first time, the golden boy had no polished speech ready. I left the folder on the table and walked to the door. Behind me, I heard my father ask again, lower this time, "Mason, how bad is it?" I didn't stay for the answer. I already knew it was worse than they imagined. That was the first crack in the golden boy statue. The collapse didn't happen all at once. It happened in humiliating pieces. First, Mason lost access to the warehouse on Monday morning because he couldn't pay the overdue balance. Then 2 drivers quit after their direct deposits failed. Then a client canceled a contract because Mason missed 3 scheduled deliveries in one day. By Wednesday, the confident posts on his company's social media disappeared. By Friday, he had changed his profile picture from a professional headshot to a black square with no caption, which was exactly dramatic enough to make people ask questions without making him answer them. Meanwhile, I did something that felt almost rebellious. I used money on myself. I enrolled in a healthcare fraud analytics certification I had postponed twice because Mason needed the help more. The first payment came out of my account, and for once, I didn't feel panic. I felt space. At work, my manager, Victor Hayes, noticed I was staying late for the training modules and asked what I was working toward. When I told him, he said, "That certification could put you on our audit leadership track." Leadership track. The phrase stayed with me all week. I had spent so long being Mason's emergency fund that I forgot I had my own future to build. 2 weeks after the dinner, I got assigned to review a complex billing compliance project, the kind of project I used to think I wasn't ready for. I completed it early. Victor called it clean, precise, and promotion-level work. I saved that email, not because I needed applause, but because it was proof that when my energy wasn't being drained, I could actually grow. Mason, on the other hand, started unraveling in public. He borrowed money from 2 cousins and didn't pay them back. He asked an old college friend to float payroll and got laughed out of the conversation. He posted vague quotes about betrayal, loyalty, and people who leave when you need them most. My mother liked every post. Then, one Saturday morning, he posted a photo of our childhood with the caption, "Some people forget blood when money is involved." I stared at it for less than 10 seconds before blocking him. Not muting, not unfollowing, blocking. My mother called within minutes. "Did you block your brother?" "Yes. He's hurting." "So am I. But he's losing his business." "Mom, I lost 18 months of my life quietly. He's losing a lie loudly." She went silent. I thought she had hung up, but then she said, "You sound cold." That hurt, but it didn't break me. "No," I said, "I sound clear." The next day, Mason's company page disappeared completely. By Monday, my father called me for the first time without my mother on the line. His voice sounded older. "Tessa, did you know Mason used your payments to qualify for a business loan?" I closed my eyes. I hadn't known. "What loan?" "He listed your recurring transfers as operating revenue." My stomach turned. That wasn't just selfish. That was dangerous. My father continued, "The lender is asking questions because the deposit stopped." For a moment, I couldn't speak. Mason had not only used my money, he had used the appearance of my money to look stable on paper. My father sighed. "I'm sorry, Tess." It was the first time in years he had called me Tess without needing something. "Dad," I said carefully, "do not cover this for him." He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "I don't think I can." That sentence felt like thunder in the distance. Something bigger was coming, and for once, it wasn't coming for me. The next week, Mason made the mistake that ended the family myth for good. He posted a long emotional message online about being sabotaged by someone close and forced to shut down a promising business because family support disappeared overnight. He never named me, but he didn't have to. Relatives started texting. One cousin wrote, "I don't know what happened, but business is hard. Maybe don't kick someone when they're down." Another sent a prayer emoji and a lecture about forgiveness. I didn't respond to any of them. Then Natalie called me during lunch and said, "Tessa, you need to look at the comments." I opened the post reluctantly, expecting more sympathy for Mason. Instead, I saw his former driver, a woman named Kayla, had commented, "Support disappeared? You mean the sister whose card you used for the warehouse? The one you told us was your silent investor? Pay your people before posting poems." My heart stopped. Under her comment, another former employee added, "He told us his family money was secured." Then payroll bounced. Then a vendor wrote, "We sent 3 overdue notices. Stop blaming family." Mason deleted the post within 20 minutes, but screenshots had already spread through the family group chat. This time, I didn't have to defend myself. Other people did it for me. That evening, my mother came to my apartment. She didn't call first. I opened the door and found her standing there with no makeup, no speech prepared, no tissue in hand for Mason. Just my mother, looking smaller than I had ever seen her. "Can I come in?" she asked. I almost said no, but I stepped aside. She sat on my couch, twisting her wedding ring. I saw the screenshots. I waited. I didn't know about the loan. I didn't know about the payroll. I didn't know he was telling people you were an investor. Her voice cracked. "I thought you were helping him because you wanted to." That sentence almost made me laugh from exhaustion. "Mom, I wanted to help him the first time, maybe the second. After that, I was afraid of what would happen if I stopped." She looked at me then, really looked at me. "Afraid of him? Afraid of all of you." The words sat between us, heavy and undeniable. She covered her mouth. "Tessa." Every time Mason struggled, the family turned toward me like I was the solution. Every time I struggled, you told me to be patient, be generous, be understanding. I became the family's backup plan, and nobody asked if I was okay being used that way. My mother cried then, but quietly. It wasn't the performance she used at family meetings. It was real grief, and I didn't know what to do with it. "I failed you," she whispered. I wanted to accept the apology immediately because that would have been easier, but healing isn't a light switch. "You did," I said. She flinched, but she nodded. "Mason is at the house," she said after a moment. "Your father told him we're not paying the warehouse debt. He didn't take it well. I'm not paying it either." "I know." That surprised me. She wiped her face. "I'm not here to ask you for money." I stared at her, waiting for the hidden request. There wasn't one. "I'm here because Mason said if you don't come tonight, he'll never speak to you again." I almost smiled. That's supposed to scare me? My mother looked down. "It used to." She was right. It used to. But not anymore. Still, something in me knew this couldn't end through screenshots and silence. I didn't owe Mason rescue, but I owed myself closure. So I grabbed my keys and said, "Fine, I'll come, but I'm not bringing a checkbook." My mother nodded. "I know." And that was how I walked back into my parents' house, not as the family fixer, not as the guilty sister, but as the person Mason could no longer control. When I entered my parents' living room, Mason was standing by the window with a duffel bag at his feet. For 1 second, I thought he was leaving out of pride. Then I saw the unopened envelopes on the coffee table, the overdue notices, the loan documents, the final warehouse demand letter. And I understood. He wasn't leaving because he wanted independence. He was leaving because the version of his life built on my money had finally evicted him. My father sat in his recliner, silent and exhausted. My mother stood near the kitchen, arms folded tightly like she was physically stopping herself from rushing over to comfort him. Mason turned when he heard me. His eyes were red, but his voice was still bitter. "Happy now?" I didn't answer immediately. I walked to the coffee table and looked at the papers. "No, but I'm free." He scoffed. "You ruined me and now you're giving speeches?" My father's voice cut through the room. "Mason, enough." That shocked all of us. Mason turned toward him. "Dad, she did this." My father stood slowly. "No, she stopped doing this. There's a difference." Mason looked betrayed, as if accountability were a knife no one had warned him about. My mother stepped forward, her voice trembling but firm. "Your sister did not ruin your business. You built something you couldn't support. Then let us praise you while she carried the weight." Mason's face twisted. "So everyone's against me now?" "No," I said. "Everyone is finally looking at you." He stared at me, and for the first time he had no audience left to perform for. No applause, no mother rushing to excuse him. No father blaming me for making trouble. Just receipts, consequences, and the silence after a lie dies. He sat down hard on the couch and put his head in his hands. "I was going to fix it," he muttered. "I just needed more time." I sat across from him, not beside him. That mattered. "You didn't need more time, Mason. You needed more money, more silence, and more people willing to believe the version of you that felt better than the truth." He wiped his face angrily. "What do you want me to say?" "The truth." He laughed once, but it broke halfway through. "Fine. I lied. I told people I had investors. I told Mom you only helped once. I told Dad the business was stable. I used your transfers to make the loan application look stronger. I thought once I got bigger contracts, I'd pay everything back before anyone found out." My mother covered her mouth. My father looked away. I felt something inside me loosen, but it wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. It was confirmation. "And when I stopped?" I asked. Mason swallowed. I panicked. "No," I said. When I stopped, you blamed me. He didn't deny it. That silence was the closest he had come to honesty. I took a folded paper from my purse and placed it on the table. Mason eyed it like it might explode. What is that? A boundary. He frowned. A what? A written boundary. I'm not paying your debts. I'm not co-signing anything. I'm not covering payroll, rent, insurance, software, or emergencies. I'm not answering abusive texts. I'm not letting mom or dad pressure me on your behalf. If you want a relationship with me, it starts with a real apology and a repayment plan reviewed by a financial counselor. Not because I expect to get every dollar back, but because you need to face what you took. Mason stared at the paper. You're treating me like a criminal. No, I'm treating myself like a person. My mother started crying again, but this time she didn't ask me to soften it. My father picked up the paper, read it, and said, "This is reasonable." Mason looked at him in disbelief. Reasonable? I might have to file bankruptcy. Then you file, my father said. I might lose the company. Then you lose it. Mason's shoulders caved in. The words finally landed because they came from the person who had always rescued him with silence. He looked at me, and his voice dropped. I don't know who I am without it. That was the first honest sentence he had said all night. For a moment I saw my brother, not the golden boy, not the fake founder, just a scared man who had mistaken praise for identity. I could have reached for him. The old Tessa wanted to, but the new Tessa knew compassion without boundaries becomes self-destruction. Then find out, I said, but don't use me as the mirror anymore. He cried then, not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet, defeated kind of crying that made the room feel older. He apologized, but I didn't hug him right away. I thanked him for saying it and told him I needed time. That was another boundary. A week later, Mason shut down the business officially. He moved into a smaller apartment, sold the watch, took a night shift warehouse job, and enrolled in a basic accounting course because the counselor told him he didn't understand cash flow well enough to run anything. Some relatives called it sad. I called it overdue. My mother stopped praising him as self-made. My father stopped asking me to be the bigger person. And me? I finished my certification, moved into a better apartment, and accepted a promotion that paid more than enough to rebuild what I had lost. Mason and I didn't become close overnight. This isn't that kind of story. Some damage does not disappear because someone finally says sorry. But one evening, months later, he sent me a payment confirmation for $200 with a note. First repayment. I know it's not enough. I'm starting anyway. I stared at it for a long time, then replied, "Keep going." That was all. No heart emoji, no speech, no rescue, just 2 words in a closed door that might someday open differently. What I learned is this. Love is not measured by how much you let someone take from you. Real love sometimes means letting people face the consequences they have spent years avoiding. Setting boundaries does not make you selfish. It means you finally understand that your life has value too. And if someone can only love you while you are useful, then losing their approval might be the beginning of your freedom. So tell me honestly, have you ever had to stop saving someone you loved because saving them was destroying you?